1971, when then Governor Ronald Reagan closed mental hospitals across the state, the intentions was for people to receive services in their home communities. However, funding was not provided to those communities to provide those services, and a large number of mentally ill homeless people started to appear on our streets.
The TV was filled with news. I remember being there in the front room of the shelter watching all the news. People being laid off, people homeless, all of that. That to me was when we actually began to see more folks that you could say, these folks don't have a place to go.
A group of volunteers from Berkeley's Jewish community came together to form a small outreach response, talking to people on the street, referring them to health clinics, helping them apply for income benefits, and doing whatever they could to fill the gap.
I first heard about the organization that became BOSS back in the day when it was Berkeley Support Services. And I had been living in a little apartment on Addison Street that, in the way of a world, I ran out of money and couldn't find a job and was looking for a place to stay. I think the only other programs for homeless folks were the traditional missions in Richmond and in Oakland. There were no other programs at that time.
In 1975, the small nonprofit merged with the Berkeley Youth Hostel to open the first shelter for mentally ill homeless in the state.
I was originally a client, and that's actually been a long, long time ago now, thank goodness. At the time, I actually had a daughter that was about 7, and then I was kind of on my own to, find a place to stay by myself. So when that really didn't happen, I did check in with BOSS, and I stayed there for probably pretty close to a year.
Over the past 45 years, as the number of homeless people skyrocketed, BOSS secured grants and donor funding to add a slew of new programs, expanding to Oakland and Hayward and opening new shelters, transitional houses, employment services, adult education classes, AIDS housing, drug and alcohol recovery services, and after-school programs for homeless children, leadership development programs, and much more.
Even though I technically, even today, do not have a job, I do still work. I do feel that I'm just as important as everybody else is, and the fact that somebody doesn't have a job or doesn't own a house does not mean that they're laying at home every day eating bonbons.
BOSS's impact is broader and deeper than emergency assistance. An integral part of BOSS's DNA has always been community and economic development, rebuilding communities by giving individuals and family the tools they need for lasting self-sufficiency.
I've been with BOSS for almost 2 years now. I started out as a client. I lived at 8th Street Shelter in Hayward. I lived there for 3 months. I got ready to move out into my own place and branch out into the world. I moved and they gave me a permanent job here. I love my job. I work with underage youth, and we try to build their lives to keep them going and to pursue jobs, housing on their own.
Today, the work of the hundreds of board, staff, volunteer, and participants who have been part of the BOSS family for decades are present in the array of programs that dot the East Bay. True to our DNA of community and economic development, today, BOSS is expanding in the field of reentry, integrating formerly incarcerated individuals into our communities through education, employment, and positive community relationships.
We provide services to nearly 200 individuals that have been systems impacted, whether that's people who are on welfare, social services, public assistance, or are formerly incarcerated, or were impacted as a youth in the juvenile youth centers, and maybe not are formerly incarcerated as adults, but have certainly been touched by the system in their youth.
These programs continue BOSS's 45-year legacy of creating as wide a tent as possible to serve and support all those affected by economic, racial, or social injustices. We are also expanding our work with transitional age youth, including conversion of one of our transitional houses into permanent supportive housing for youth.
Having that support system is what a lot of people fall back on. So things like their career, or not having a home, or not knowing where the next meal is going to come from, or not knowing how to struggle through your education process. Having that support system to help guide you or push you through is really vital, and I think BOSS does that perfectly.
We are expanding our work with the severely mentally ill in partnership with Alameda County, connecting them with healthcare, affordable housing, jobs, and social support. And as we have from the beginning, we continue to provide outreach to people in need, to bring them in, out of the cold, and into the light and hope.
Everyone has a story, unique and individual, their story. The folks that come through our doors here at BOSS, our attempt is to help them transform that story based on their needs, their abilities, their preferences, and their strengths. That transformation would not happen without the dynamic and supportive staff, supported by me, our board of directors, and our funders, our donors, volunteers. And for that, I want to say thank you for your ongoing support and collaboration to make BOSS the best that it could be, a community treasure.
Live life, overcome any task, overcome any task, overcome any task. Spread, rhymes, spread, rhymes, spread. Live life. Live life, overcome any task, overcome any task. Spread, rhymes, spread.